Welcome to the Nailed It Wall.
Welcome to part one of a two-part series we're doing on Most Likely to Succeed. We felt there was so much great stuff we couldn't get into one episode, so buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to the Nailed It Wall. I'm Mr. Lane, the STEM guy.
And I'm Mrs. Schofield.
On this week's episode, we're going to talk a lot about a documentary that we both finally had time to sit down and finally watch, which is
Most Likely to Succeed.
Now, this has kind of been the basis for a lot of what we've been doing in our classrooms, what we've been creating in our classrooms, the things that kind of get us excited. And all these things spawn from exactly like the trailers. Both of us have not read the book, but we've seen the trailer over and over, and we're like, this is just so amazing.
It really is. And I think that was the thing. Like, we didn't know all of, the details of the movie, but we knew that this spoke to what we really believe education should be more like. And I think that we definitely have just kind of gleaned from even just their concepts early on, things that we wanted to start incorporating, namely the soft skills.
Yes. So we're so excited to talk about this week, but we got to start off with our nailed it, failed it. I think we got to start talking today. It's 114 degrees in Arizona. You told me you had to run to school, and Phil, who's our facilities manager, took down my whiteboard, and I've been working on putting a green screen in my back corner, and then also painting a pull-down screen, making that a green screen, and putting up a Lego wall. And I said, I have to run to Home Depot, and I need to get these things for my classroom. I'm like, do you want to come? And you're like, of course I want to come.
Of course I do. I love Home Depot.
And then tell us what happened next.
Well, first we were hazy on what we should do, and we finally settled on some kind of board. Still don't even know the name of it.
Kind of looks like a humongous whiteboard.
Yeah. So pretty flimsy, and so we got 4 of those, and weren't positive how that was going to work. We are still not positive about painting it, but I think we've narrowed it down about how to go about that, and then realized that they would not fit in the car. As we kind of thought perhaps they might.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. Totally nailed it. So you brought your trusty, what are those even called?
Wrenches, sockets, I don't know, tighteners, fasteners.
They're fasteners. There's a good name for them, but it's going to come to me later. But we strapped that down to the roof. We genuinely thought we had lost them on the way. We didn't.
I couldn't feel them.
Couldn't feel them. My heart dropped. But they made it.
You had a great look of panic on your face.
It was very, very scary. I thought I was single-handedly keeping those on the roof. And we got here, and Phil is seriously the man, and they're up, and they're in process. We hit a few snags even still with that, with screw sizes and kind of adhering different things to the wall. But it is a work in progress, and it is so cool to finally see that happen.
Yes, and pictures coming soon, and a big part of that is Most Likely to Succeed, and all the schools and all the amazing people doing some pretty cool things out there. This has also been a big week for you in a pop culture kind of sense. Your girls brought home the World Cup. Did you miss a single minute of the World Cup?
No way. That was awesome.
That was like your summer. That was your summer right there.
I am all in on soccer and could not be any prouder of those female athletes really raising awareness and giving voice to some inequities there that need to be addressed. And so I'm just so proud of them, and just for them to be those role models that they are for all the girls in our nation and across multiple nations. That is huge what they did, and I'm just so proud.
It's pretty awesome. In the parade in New York City, all the little girls out there, and you think about like this next wave, like how much they were inspired by the girls in '99, even in Abby Wambach's like era as well. And it was just so cool to kind of see, like, I think it was the state of Virginia who's no longer going to allow like the men to play in that state until there's equal pay among the men and women. Snoop Dogg has come out. You're fired up about your boy from your backyard coming out and kind of really lending his voice to this cause. And it's kind of crazy when we talk so much about like equity in STEM, gender equity, change the odds, that these girls are paid 1/10 of what the men would be paid if they achieved all those bonuses.
Well, and the message that sends to all these girls that just saw them achieve this huge, huge accomplishment, in a whole another part of the world. They worked so hard. They had some crazy good games. Just did amazing. So what does that kind of message does that send to these young girls that are watching all of that? And so to really start, and the conversation's been going on, but it really gave them such a good platform, and they're taking advantage of that and making sure to not, shut that conversation down, which is awesome.
I love it. Also, another big week for you. I mean, you had an epic week here. Also hit up the Shawn Mendes concert. Give us a rundown of your man, Shawn Mendes.
I do love Shawn Mendes. He puts on a good show. But what I really love is, again, these artists. So I don't know that I'm really in the demographics for the Shawn Mendes fan club. I am a fan. However, I noticed there were way younger girls at that concert. But he was so awesome with just showing so much love to his crowd, but then taking a moment to really give voice to people's worth and their power, and not giving that away. And same with Alicia Cara, who was the opening act, and she really talked about girls and their self-esteem and just knowing your worth. And both those artists, you have an entire stadium filled with young girls. I mean, that was pretty much it. It was me and every young girl. And so that's awesome. They could have totally missed that opportunity. But for me, when, we have such a heart for getting girls to really have that self-confidence, and, that goes right back in with this movie, is self-confidence. That's such a huge soft skill, and it's for leadership and just the ability to step out, and you just really need to instill that every single chance you get. So I love that they took that time to do that.
And I think the most amazing thing about this concert is that your daughter, who's going to be a sophomore in high school, let you go to the concert with her.
Oh,
you got to attend the concert with her and Sidro and Mrs. Englerth, which I think at this point in your life, I know my daughter would not let me go to a concert with her when she's going to be a sophomore in high school. So
yeah, I'm very fortunate. Multiple people have said it's not typical, but for me, it is typical, so I forget that I'm extremely fortunate in that department.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty special week. There's our pop culture twist there. At least someone staying relevant in the pop culture mix there. And
that's a stretch, but I was there.
Now, how many songs do you think you actually knew?
I will say, had I heard some of them, a lot of them I had heard maybe playing. However, did I know a lot of the words? I would say about a third, which, could be worse. I like music, so I like a lot of different music. So I do know a lot of artists. However, I could have done better. But the girls, they knew every one of them except for one song. So, something to grow in.
Yeah. All right, changing gears, we're going to move into Most Likely to Succeed. Now, what was your biggest takeaway from this documentary?
I don't even know how you say what your biggest takeaway, because it's just so huge. I would say the biggest takeaway is it fit perfectly into our mentality, our the way we approach education, what we keep saying from the beginning about what's important, and we have curriculum, and there's things that we're supposed to teach. However, I think the biggest thing from this documentary is to say those things are super important. However, the big thing that you're really supposed to be helping these kids is to prepare them for life, and the things they need for life are not necessarily those content things. So you do a really good job talking about the soft skills, so why don't you pop in there?
Yeah, and this is something that since we started our journey in terms of starting a computer science program, a STEM special, you becoming a teacher over the last couple of years, something that we really saw in the first hour of code. Like in that first hour of code 5 or 6 years ago, we saw immediately that education was changing in the sense that the kids no longer need to recall all this information. It's about how well do you work together. So a lot of schools do the 4 C's. I'm still true to the 5 core soft skills that all the big tech companies are looking for. That I think the most powerful thing when the guy from Google was talking, and he said, we don't want those high achievers, because those people that score the highest on the test, they can't work well together. They can't problem solve. They're not persistent. They're not going to stay with it. So in my classroom, I always talk about the 3 C's and the 2 P's, and those are my favorite things in the world: communication, creativity, collaboration, problem solving, and perseverance. All those things, tech companies, they can't get those out of students. And when our students graduate from 8th grade and go on to high school, either go to Liberty, Sandra Day, Mountain Ridge, we want them to have all those soft skills by the time they get to high school. And I think the most powerful thing at High Tech High, a lot of these kids are freshmen. I don't know if it's their first day, and he told them for 8 years of your life, 8 years of your life, you've sat in rows, you've took notes, you took tests, you turned in assignments, and that was your education. And I think our school, our staff does a great job of embedding all of those things in every core content that these kids, they're doing it, but they have no clue that they're doing it, and we're preparing them, and they're having these skills that kids are graduating from college without.
Well, that's totally true. And so the first time I watched the documentary, when you and I watched it, and then I sat down, and I was blown away. I said to you, how can they not know how to do that? Because I was pretty sure that our 8th grade students, going into 9th grade, would be able to do that. And you said, well, that's, they're used to it. But I genuinely just had a hard time believing that would be the case. And so, but you see it in that happening right there in that moment. And then I watched the documentary a second time with my daughter, and I paused it right then and I said, what do you think he's asking those students to do? What do you think is happening right here? And then she could say, he wants them to set this up. This is what I would do. And I said,
I'm going to pause you right there. It's truly amazing that you made your daughter sit down, and she actually sat down and watched this documentary with you.
She really did. And she said, please don't make me do this. And I said, I just want you to watch just this one thing. I just want you to give me your feedback on this one part. And that part came and went, and she was all in. She ended up watching the whole thing, and she really enjoyed it. But she went up and down with her thoughts and her opinions about all kinds of things that she saw, and it was just the best conversation. But I'll save that for later. But she could tell me how to, what the guy was wanting. And I said, well, why do you think that you know that? And she said, oh, I don't know. I just feel like we're used to things like that. And I think that it made me realize that you're right. As a school, our group of educators overall, I feel like we nail that pretty well. I think we don't always get it perfect, but I do think that that's a common mentality, that we're all kind of working together to make these kids more than just content driven, but you have the ability to problem solve and think outside the box.
I think Mrs. Chesborough did the most perfect thing, which was talking about the engineer and design process, and when we were kind of embedding that in all of our STEM classes, and she took each one of those steps and put that into her write-in content, and it's just amazing to kind of see. You can walk into any classroom and you're going to see collaboration, you're going to see communication, whether it was Flipgrid, whether it's through Eclipse video, or whether they're presenting in front of the class. It's truly amazing to see these type of things happen on our campus.
Yeah, I mean, they really do. And I think that right when this documentary came out was when we presented at a conference about STEM, and we were just starting to talk about that, and we talked about robots, we talked about Rubik's Cube at that, and we really started just talking about how important the soft skills were, and that was that
5 years ago?
Yeah, 5 summers ago. And
maybe,
it was really
maybe
starting
4.
to be, yeah, it might have been. I'm really bad with that. But it was really starting to be a big conversation piece, and it kind of challenged us to completely shift. And not that you weren't already doing that, but I think we're just so much more intentional.
Yeah, and it gives you a focus as a educator. What do you want to get out of your kids? Where do you want to take them, and how are you going to get them to that next level? Checking each one of those boxes, and it's hard to do within every lesson. But over the course of a project, you'll see all those skills, whether it's a STEM day, whether it's a writing assignment, whether it's a math test, you kind of see all those things kind of flow out of there. The biggest thing for me was even when there was a math teacher who graduated from Berkeley. Your father-in-law and mother went to Berkeley, so they're Berkeley alums. Special kind of people go to Berkeley. But he was sitting there talking about these soft skills that he went through traditional education. He learned A, B, and C. He did it this way, like that old model. And the parent was talking to him. It's like, yeah, but you got into Berkeley because of those things. And he was just kind of processing his mind when he was trying to tell her, I got to this Wall Street banker job and I didn't have those soft skills. I didn't have those skills to set me up for life, to be successful in this field, to do this, because I lacked those skills. And then I thought the documentary did a great job showcasing the parent side of everything about those fears. And you talk a little bit about what Ella said after she saw that in terms of, we'll talk about the teacher from Colorado.
Oh, that one was so hard for me because he was trying to be this innovator. He was seeing what's being done other places, even went to visit High Tech High and to get feedback and ideas. And he didn't just want to shove facts down. He didn't want to give kids disposable education. And he wanted stuff that was going to stick with them, that was going to really make an impact to make them more marketable later on. And so he shifted the way he was doing things. And so he sat down with the documentary people, and the guy behind the camera asked the kids, what would you rather have? And he said, would you want to ace the test, or would you want to be more successful in your life? And they said, I want to ace the test. And the math teacher's face was just so crushed. I mean, shocked. But then, they asked more questions, they kind of probed. But really, the girl had said, how do we get these jobs if we don't ace these tests? Like, this has to come first, and then you do this. And so I genuinely thought my daughter, because of everything we've exposed her to, all the opportunities that she's had, come to this school and just soared in that kind of soft skill rich environment, that I genuinely thought she would kind of have a different approach. And I said, what would you want? And she said, I would want to ace the test. And I was shocked. And I said, but don't you want it to be relevant? Don't you want it to be stuff that sticks with you? Because I know she does it. I know her peers do it. And I know my students do it. They cram. So if they have to know something, they're going to cram. They're going to study it. And then they just dump it. And I want more for the kids. And not only just knowledge, but life skills. And I want that to be such a priority. And so her first answer was, I would want to just ace the test. And that was pretty tough to hear.
You totally had the same look of the teacher in Colorado when his students said that.
Yeah, I was pretty disheartened. I was shocked. You think that you know what the kids want, but when we talked about this, what did you say? You said about the knowing. They don't know what they don't know, or something like that. And it's true.
And then you even twisted it even more, saying we don't know if this model works in the long run. When you talk about that, even High Tech High, that need came from Oracle. Oracle's based in San Diego, and they couldn't get people to graduate college to have these skills to solve those problems, right, to persevere, to get over these humps. And so this whole thing came from this, and still we don't know what in the long run, if this is going to be better. And then talk about how Ella said she liked the blend, and how much she was not a fan of the freedom. She likes the structure.
Yeah, so when they talked about
we should have just had Ella on. I mean, sorry, we're paraphrasing a lot for this. So.
But when I showed her, as they're watching and they're describing High Tech High, when they first introduce it, they're saying no separated content levels, no bells that tell you when the next subject goes. It's all pretty much just kind of intermixed. It's very free flow, kind of more organic. And then I was even, in there, I was highlighting for her, see, those are both ninth grade groups, but one is going to demonstrate their understanding in this way, and one's going to do a play, one's going to do this gear thing. And that was really unsettling for her. And I said, wouldn't it be so cool if you're not dictated by your bells, and then you pack it up and then it's the next subject, and it's just you just get into the meat of it. And she said, I like the routine, I like the structure, I like the routine, I like to know that things are separate. It makes me feel comfortable. Well, why though are they comfortable? It's because that's what they know. So yeah, they're going to choose that. They're going to choose it because we've trained them. Even at our school, which is super progressive, it's still typically you have a reading block when they're little, and then you go to writing, and then you go to your math block. They still know
travel
that.
In those packs,
Yeah.
You're all together within that one group, and
so it's comfortable, it's familiar, But then when the whole thing was over, and I said, I'm just struggling with your answers on some of these things. Do you really want that? Would you really want that better? And I said, you don't even know if you're going to be marketable. Yeah, you could get into a good college, but what they're saying is these people, they graduate and there's no jobs. No one wants to hire them. So who cares if you get into college if you're not marketable? So, it's one of those things. And I said, and plus, wouldn't you want to be in a job that you love, that you're good at, that you have these skills that just really let you go anywhere? And she said, yeah, I guess that really I don't want one way. I don't want the old way. I don't know that I would be comfortable in that new way. I think I would want like a perfect blend of both. And maybe that's the goal. And High Tech High said they don't know if it's going to be successful overall. They think it will, but it would take 10 to 15 years. And that what was the 4-year, like, is that when it came out 4 years ago?
Yeah.
So still a lot of years before it could come out. However, like they have a high rate of college acceptance. It's like 98%, and then you have them scoring 10% over the state average on testing. Is it better? I don't know. I mean, it's hard. That's hard to say.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was most powerful for me was when they went to Phillips Academy and they had students who pretty much aced the science final or the science test. I think the average overall was a B. And these students were taught to ace this test. They crammed, they had these skills. And 3 months later, it's not like 6 months, it's not a year later, it's 3 months later, they were given the same exact test, things that they have mastered, have these skills, they're prepared to do, and then the overall average was an F. So it's like all this information is crammed and it's dumped like within 3 months, like you no longer have those skills. And I thought that was like the most powerful thing that I saw. I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that this is like what we're still doing to our students, that we're going to get them to a point, and then when they get out in the real world, they're not going to be able to know what to do with that knowledge, that content. Even the teacher in Colorado, like it was I think it was more powerful for me as a teacher and a parent to see that it was the highest students that really struggled with this, that they found this new change of education was not what they wanted. Like they did not want to have those skills for life. They just wanted to ace the test and like get onto that next phase in their life and be like, this is the safe route. Like you do very well in high school, you go to a good college, you get a good job. But on the flip side of that, I love the mother of the 9th grader.
Samantha.
Yeah, her mother was awesome in terms of,
and
I thought it was like great how the teachers, like when they were like, maybe we cover 40% of the standards. I was like, oh my goodness, that would be insane. Like, what would your evaluation be like if you covered 40% of the standards, or maybe we get to 60%? It was like, we don't know. And I was like, imagine just having that freedom, which is a big thing of like High Tech High. All these teachers are on 1-year contracts. But the mother, she said, something's happening here. She's like, something exciting's happening here. She's talking to me about her day, the things she's doing. I don't understand it, but what I am seeing is some of my friends who are in their 30s and 40s are living with their parents, working for their parents' their stores, and they went to good schools. They were architecture. They went to law school. They did all these cool things, and because they didn't have these skills, either it could be the market, could be jobs dried up, could be a lot of things, and she understood that she wanted to give her daughter more.
Well, the other thing about that, how you were saying maybe they get to 40% of the content, maybe 60. What was interesting and later on that they talk about is, we may not get to all that content and other schools may get through all of it. However, if you can't retain it, then really how did you benefit? Because we have such depth of knowledge in what we do cover that those kids leave and there's no doubt that they retain that. So if they're going to dump it, if they're going to kind of lose it anyway, then how is that more beneficial because they were lightly exposed to it? It's just such an interesting way to look at it. And kids learn by doing. Like they learn by doing. I mean, that's what your whole class is with the whole maker space. The stuff that they will discover when they create is totally different. That is 100%.
I completely agree that it's an exciting time for education. There's so much going on in terms of the way schools are going. But for me and you, like just being progressive, that's who we are. We love learning all these cool things. Even today, I was talking to a parent and she's like, how do you learn all this stuff? Is it from PD? Is it the schools giving you these things? And it's really just us excited about these opportunities for our students, want to bring back to our classroom. We YouTube a lot. We find things on Twitter. We research them, and we kind of we get inspired by other teachers, how they're using these things, and we're like, oh, let's try to do this in our classroom. But the hard thing for us, too, is that even in our own district, that there's two schools that might make this shift to a traditional schools, because that's what parents know. It's not the Common Core math. It's not a different way of learning. It's not a different way of doing things, and that's comfortable. And that will give these parents a sense of, this is how I did it. This is how I went to college. This is how I got good grades. I did read and write and arithmetic at these set times, and I had this much homework every night. And now I like the part in the documentary where you have a very you have this
average.
Yeah,
It was a good enough or average life, average job. Well, and I really think that that's the big thing, because that's pretty much the cutoff, is the parents. That now that system doesn't necessarily work, because that worked when we were filling a certain set of jobs, but now that even Amazon, everything is becoming automated. There's all kinds of things. You have to be able to diversify.
Yeah,
you have to learn new skills.
Yeah, and all these jobs that are going to be required, anything that requires like mundane, like repeated tasks, are going to be replaced by robots. We're in a day and age where there could be 20 million jobs replaced just by robots. Even truckers, they were blown away. I saw this documentary where this truck could do all the things that they could do, and they couldn't believe it, because all of a sudden, if you don't have these soft skills, you're not going to be able to get in the workforce and be an asset and give back. And I've seen so many things on Twitter that's popped up where a guy just coded and automated his job, and he can just go there and sit there and collect a check because he did it to himself. Like he basically outsmarted himself by doing this, and all of those jobs, they're going to be gone. And we're already seeing it. I'd love to go tour an Amazon warehouse, and they give
Me
those
too.
tours just to kind of see those robots.
Yeah.
We were so excited just seeing Scout. I mean, you just think about if drones and Scout deliveries, you think of like all those jobs could be eliminated just from Amazon.
They will be eliminated, and that's what they really are addressing. I know that the other thing is familiar, and I know this is uncharted territory. However, the tides are turning. You have to be able to change and make yourself relevant. And I think that that's the big thing that they talk about.
Yeah, and I think we're going to stop it right there for part 1. Tune in next week for part 2 as we kind of take a look more in depth to this documentary, what it's meant to us, and how education is changing because of this. If you're like us and you can't get enough of the Nailed It Wall, follow us on Twitter. You can find me at Mr. Lane the STEM Guy.
And me at A Positive Pro.